Homelessness, particularly in people who are known to use drugs, who are on the street, people see them as other. You know, it's them. It's not me. And there's sometimes a sense that there's a choice, that somebody chooses to do that, chooses to be there, chooses to be in that situation. And I think we sometimes forget that it can happen to anybody, depending on certain situations, depending on what's happening in your life. There can be traumas that happen, and it's not other, it is us. It's our own community, our own family, our own friends who can very often end up in very similar situations.
I think the main misconception is that people choose it as a lifestyle, and that it's the result of the choices that they made. And therefore there's some kind of blame that they shoulder for it, as opposed to understanding that it's usually the result of many, many bad things happening to people and them not having a safety net or a way to avoid the big impacts that they have on them. Every homeless person I've ever met wants to find a home. They're desperate for a home. And they, and it would make a huge impact in their lives if they had one. And the other misconception is that people don't think that housing will make the difference that it will. That they don't understand how successful the provision of housing and services will be to somebody. It's life-changing, a life-changing moment for people when they get their keys and they have a front door that they can close.
It is really unbelievable what people have to put up with. Imagine getting up in the morning from a sleeping bag on a sidewalk and having to find a bathroom. And all the restaurants have keys and locks, and they already know you. You can't go there. And then on top of that, so many people have tried to self-medicate themselves away from their problems with substances. And so then you spend basically your whole day hustling to get some money to buy some either drugs or alcohol. And what a horrible existence that is, having to shoplift and steal and scam. And it's a 24/7 activity for a lot of people just to survive. We've just created such obstacles for people and such a violent structure for people to live in, that, and then we expect them just to smarten up and get on with things. It doesn't make any sense.
When we think about indigenous people with all the trauma surrounding like the colonizations and what happened in the past generations, they have already a lot of trauma in their life, had trauma or have trauma in their life, and the overdose crisis is just adding more trauma to that. And it's really sad to see these people losing their only friends, family, members, son, brothers and friends with the overdose crisis.
We have so many people that have been harmed and injured, either at work, in foster care, in prisons, on the streets. They have been injured and wounded in so many ways. And these are the people who need our help, who need hope, and who need a decent healthcare system. I know that if my daughter or my son had a place to go 3 times a day without judgment and with dignity and respect to take care of their addiction or their health care, they would have time to stabilize and they would have time to move on with their lives.
It's not just an economic issue, it's also a social issue. So if you're somebody whose social fabric has fallen apart for whatever reason, I've heard stats that 80% of folks who are homeless were in foster care. So if you don't have people around you, that's what puts you at risk. I'm at a point in my life right now where I've got enough social fabric, enough people around me that love me, that I'm actually not at risk of being homeless. So the people who end up on our streets are people who often were bullied as children and it never stopped. It just continued on throughout their lives. There are people who don't have family around them to protect them. There are people whose social fabric, because of homophobia or transphobia or racism or whatever that is, has fallen apart. And I think part of our collective duty is to provide services to increase that social fabric.